I need to tell you something I've never shared publicly before. Even now at 63, it's hard to admit that I spent 4 years of my life trapped in what everyone else saw as a beautiful second chance at love. My husband was a retired bank manager, respected in our community, active in our church. Our neighbors in suburban Ohio thought we were the sweetest couple they'd ever seen. But behind the white picket fence of our Victorian home, he slowly erased everything I was until the morning I collapsed in our garden and my 8-year-old granddaughter asked me a question that shattered everything. The paramedics arrived to find my husband crying, telling them I'd been working too hard in the heat. But when the emergency room nurse pulled the curtain closed and looked into my eyes, she saw something he couldn't hide. I'm getting ahead of myself, though. My name is Eleanor, but everyone calls me Ellie. I was 58 when I met David at a church volunteer program in Columbus. My first husband, Michael, had died in a car accident 3 years earlier after 32 years of marriage. One icy December morning, he left for work and never came home. A semi-truck had jackknifed on the highway. They told me he didn't suffer, but I suffered enough for both of us. Our 2 daughters, Catherine and Melissa, were grown with families of their own. Catherine lived in Cincinnati with her husband and my granddaughter Sophie. Melissa was in Chicago. After Michael died, I'd rattle around our house like a ghost, talking to his picture, setting 2 plates at dinner before remembering. The grief support group at church helped, but what really saved me was the volunteer program at the food bank. That's where I met David. He was 64, a widower whose wife Martha had passed from a heart condition 5 years prior. He had kind blue eyes, a gentle smile, and this way of really listening when you spoke. He'd been a bank manager for 35 years before retiring, and he carried himself with this quiet dignity that reminded me of my father. We started as friends, sorting canned goods side by side every Tuesday morning. He'd tell me about his son Andrew in Seattle, show me pictures of his grandchildren. I'd share stories about Sophie's ballet recitals and Melissa's new promotion. Somewhere between the soup cans and pasta boxes, I started looking forward to Tuesdays in a way I hadn't looked forward to anything since Michael died. After 8 months, he asked me to dinner. A real date, he said, not just coffee after volunteering. I remember the guilt that washed over me, like I was betraying Michael's memory. But Catherine had been gently encouraging me to open my heart again. Life is for the living, Mom, she'd said. Dad would want you to be happy. David courted me like something out of an old movie. Fresh flowers every week. Handwritten notes left on my car windshield. He planned thoughtful dates to the botanical gardens, quiet dinners at family-owned Italian restaurants, walks along the Scioto River. He told me I was beautiful when I felt like a 58-year-old widow who'd forgotten how to smile. He held my hand like it was something precious. When he proposed after 14 months, it felt like grace. Like God had given me a second chance I never expected to receive. My daughters met him multiple times. They appreciated how he never tried to replace their father, how he spoke respectfully of Michael's memory, how he seemed genuinely interested in being part of our family without overwhelming it. We married at our church with a small ceremony, family and close friends. Sophie was the flower girl, scattering rose petals down the aisle with the seriousness of a surgeon. I wore a cream-colored dress, and when David looked at me at the altar, his eyes glistened with tears. "This is the happiest day of my second life," he whispered. I sold my house, the home where I'd raised my daughters, where Michael had built the treehouse in the backyard, where we'd celebrated 32 Christmases. It was the hardest thing I'd ever done, but David's Victorian home was beautiful, and he promised we'd make new memories there. We'd redecorate together, he said, make it ours. Looking back, I should have noticed how his suggestions always became our decisions, how the paint colors I liked were gently dismissed in favor of what Martha had originally chosen, how my furniture ended up in the guest room or the garage while his remained in place. But I told myself I was being flexible, that compromise was part of marriage, that a house was just a house. The first few months were lovely. We'd cook together, work in the garden, attend church on Sundays holding hands. His son called every other week, and David would light up talking to his grandchildren. My daughters would visit, and David was the perfect host, charming and attentive. I felt lucky. I felt blessed. The changes crept in so gradually I didn't recognize them as changes at all. One evening, I mentioned signing up for a watercolor class at the community center. I'd always wanted to paint but never had time while teaching second grade for 30 years. Now retired, with time stretching before me, it seemed perfect. David looked up from his crossword puzzle. Watercolor class? His voice was pleasant, but something flickered beneath it that I couldn't name. That's quite an expense for something you might not even enjoy. It's $45 for 6 weeks, I said. I have my pension. We're comfortable. He set down his pen. Ellie, I just think we should be practical. We're on fixed incomes. Besides, wouldn't you rather spend that time here with me? I thought you enjoyed our quiet evenings. I did enjoy our evenings, but I also wanted something of my own. Still, I didn't want to start an argument over $45. I told myself he was probably right, that I could paint at home if I really wanted to. I didn't sign up for the class. The next month, Catherine called to invite us to Sophie's spring ballet recital. I was thrilled. I marked it on the calendar, already planning what I'd wear. When I told David, he frowned. That's Saturday? But that's when we do our weekly grocery shopping and meal prep. You know I like to keep our routine consistent. We could do it Friday, I suggested. Or Sunday. His jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. I just think routine is important, Ellie. Structure is what makes a household run smoothly. Martha and I had our routines for 40 years, and it worked beautifully. There it was. The first comparison, Martha and I. It worked beautifully. I went to Sophie's recital anyway. David claimed a headache and stayed home. When I returned, bursting to tell him how Sophie had been the sugar plum fairy, how she'd spotted me in the audience and waved, he was reading in the den. He didn't look up when I came in, didn't ask about the recital, didn't acknowledge me at all. That night, silence sat between us like a third person at dinner. This became the pattern. Whenever I did something he hadn't approved, he'd withdraw. Not angry, not shouting, just absent. He'd answer in monosyllables. He'd look through me rather than at me. The silence could last for days. This cold emptiness that made me feel like I was disappearing. I started declining invitations from my daughters. It was easier than dealing with the aftermath. I told myself I was being considerate, that I was choosing my marriage over trivial social obligations. That's what a good wife did, wasn't it? Then came the comments about my appearance. We were dressing for Sunday service when he looked at my floral dress and sighed. You're wearing that? I'd worn this dress to church a dozen times. What's wrong with it? Nothing, I suppose. It's just Martha always took such care with her appearance on Sundays. She understood that how we present ourselves reflects on our family. I went back upstairs and changed into something more conservative. And again, and again. Until he nodded his approval at a gray suit that made me feel like I was attending a funeral. The comments about my cooking came next. Michael and I had always shared kitchen duties, and I was a decent cook, nothing fancy but wholesome and filling. David would take a bite of dinner, pause, and set down his fork with a small sigh. Is something wrong? No, it's fine. Just different from how Martha made her casserole. She had this special touch with the seasoning. Or the roast is a bit dry, but that's okay. You're still learning. Or you forgot to preheat the oven again, Ellie. I bought cookbooks. I watched cooking videos online. I spent hours in the kitchen trying to replicate meals I'd never tasted, made by a woman I'd never met, for a man who was never satisfied. Half the time he'd barely touch his plate. The other half, he'd eat in silence, and I'd wonder which was worse. My friend Janet from church called one afternoon. We'd been close before my marriage, grabbing coffee after services, volunteering together at the food bank. She wanted to meet for lunch at our usual cafe. I'd love to, I said, genuinely missing her. When I mentioned it to David that evening, he closed his book with a soft thump. Janet? The one who's always gossiping about other church members? She doesn't gossip, she's just friendly. His expression hardened. I just think you should be more selective about your friendships, Ellie. At our age, we should surround ourselves with uplifting people. But do what you want. He picked up his book again. You always do. That last line lodged in my chest like a splinter. I always did what I wanted? I'd given up my painting class. I barely saw my daughters. I'd stopped attending the monthly book club I'd loved. I was home every single day, trying to cook meals that were never right, wearing clothes that were never appropriate, becoming smaller and smaller. But I canceled lunch with Janet, and when she called again, I let it go to voicemail. Eventually, she stopped calling. Catherine noticed something was wrong during one of her rare visits. She pulled me aside while David was showing Sophie the garden. "Mom, are you okay? You seem so different lately." "I'm fine, honey. Just adjusting to married life." She studied my face. "You've lost weight, and you never call anymore. It's always me calling you, and you rush off the phone so fast." "David and I are just busy," I said. "Busy doing what?" "You're both retired." I didn't have an answer. Or rather, I had an answer I couldn't say aloud. She looked at me with her father's eyes. "Mom, you seem smaller somehow, like you're fading." I laughed it off, but her words haunted me for days. Smaller, fading. Was that what I'd become? The real trouble began on a Tuesday afternoon. I was sorting through old photo albums, something I hadn't done since moving into David's house. Our house, I'd tried to call it, but it never felt like ours. I found pictures of Michael and me with the girls when they were young. Beach vacations. Christmas mornings. The day I won Teacher of the Year. I sat there holding a photo of Michael pushing Catherine on a swing, both of them laughing, and I cried. Not loud sobs, just quiet tears for the woman I used to be. David came home from his weekly coffee with his former bank colleagues and found me like that. Still crying over him? His voice was ice. "It's been 4 years, Eleanor." I wiped my eyes quickly. I just found some old photos. It caught me off guard. I put all of Martha's photos away after she died. It's not healthy to live in the past. Perhaps you should do the same. "These are photos of my daughters," I said quietly. "And him. I see him in every single one. Do you know how that makes me feel, Eleanor? Coming home to find my wife weeping over another man? He wasn't just another man. He was my husband for 32 years. The father of my children." David's face flushed deep red. "And I'm your husband now. Or does that not matter to you? Maybe that's the problem. Maybe you never wanted to marry me at all. Maybe I'm just filling time until you can be with him again." The cruelty of it stole my breath. This wasn't the gentleman from the food bank. This wasn't the person who'd written love notes on my windshield. I apologized. I put the photos in a box in the garage. I never looked at them again. After that, David's moods became a weather system I learned to read. The way his fingers would tap against his thigh when he was annoyed. How his breathing would change before he said something cutting. The particular quality of silence that meant I'd transgressed without knowing how. I stopped calling my daughters unless David was out of the house. Even then, I'd keep conversations short, always listening for his car. When they wanted to visit, I'd make excuses. Too busy. Not feeling well. Maybe next month. Catherine started showing up unannounced, and I'd frantically tidy up, making sure everything was perfect. David was charming when she was there, warm and attentive. The model husband. But I could feel his anger afterward, humming beneath his skin like a live wire. One Sunday morning, I was making eggs when I accidentally burned the toast. The smoke alarm went off. Such a small thing, but I froze, my hand trembling over the pan. David stared at the blackened bread, then at me. "Can't you do anything right?" "It was just toast. I'll make more." It's always just something with you, isn't it? Just burnt toast. Just overcooked chicken. Just a mess in the kitchen. Martha ran this household flawlessly for 40 years. But you make everything so complicated. Something in me snapped. Then maybe you should have found another Martha. The words hung in the air between us. David picked up his coffee mug, a heavy ceramic thing, and hurled it at the wall beside my head. It exploded, shards flying, coffee spraying across the wallpaper. I screamed and dropped to the floor, arms over my head. When I looked up, David was standing over me, his face composed, almost serene. "This is what happens when you push someone too far, Eleanor. Do you see what you made me do?" He stepped over me and walked out of the kitchen. A moment later, the front door slammed. I sat on the floor, surrounded by broken ceramic and cooling coffee, shaking so violently I couldn't stand. He hadn't touched me, hadn't laid a hand on me, but I was more terrified than I'd ever been in my life because I knew, with absolute certainty, that the next time could be different. But where would I go? What would I tell people? My husband threw a coffee mug? Would anyone believe me? David was respected in our community. He served on the church finance committee. He volunteered at the food bank. And I'd cut myself off from everyone who might have helped. I don't know how long I sat there, long enough for my legs to go numb, long enough for the fear to harden into something else, something like resolve. I cleaned up the coffee. I swept up the ceramic. I wiped the wall. I did all of it mechanically, my mind somewhere far away, already making calculations I didn't know I was making. David came home that evening with flowers. Roses, the kind he'd brought when we were courting. "I'm sorry," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "I don't know what came over me. It won't happen again. I love you, Ellie. You know I love you." I nodded. I cooked his dinner. I sat across from him at the table while he talked about the weather, the garden, his coffee group. We went to bed like nothing had happened, but something had shifted in me. That mug shattering against the wall had broken something else, too. My belief that this could work, my hope that the David I'd fallen in love with would return. I started having panic attacks. My heart would race without warning. I'd wake up gasping at 3 a.m. I felt dizzy all the time, like the ground was tilting beneath my feet. I lost more weight. My clothes hung off me. I looked in the mirror and barely recognized the woman staring back. Smaller. Fading. 3 weeks later, I was in the garden, planting tulip bulbs for spring. The morning was warm for October, and I'd skipped breakfast because David had criticized my oatmeal the day before, and I couldn't face cooking anything. Catherine had brought Sophie over for a surprise visit. David was at his monthly bank retirees' luncheon. Sophie was helping me dig holes for the bulbs, her little hands covered in dirt, chattering about her school play. I stood up to get more bulbs and the world tilted violently. I grabbed for the fence but missed. The last thing I remember was Sophie screaming "Grandma" and the dark Ohio soil rushing up to meet me. I woke up in the hospital. Fluorescent lights, beeping monitors. Catherine holding my hand, her face streaked with tears. Sophie was in the hallway with Melissa, who'd driven down from Chicago. "What happened?" My voice came out as a croak. "You collapsed, Mom!" Sophie called 911. "They thought you were dead." I remembered none of it. Later, Sophie would tell me she'd tried to wake me up, shaking my shoulder saying "Grandma, Grandma" over and over. When I didn't respond, she'd run inside and called 911, just like they'd taught her in school. David arrived an hour later, rushing into the room with flowers and concern painted across his face. "Ellie, my God, I came as soon as I heard. What happened?" He held my hand. He spoke to the doctors in his calm, authoritative voice. He explained that I'd been under stress lately, that I hadn't been eating well, that he'd tried to get me to take better care of myself, but I could be stubborn. The doctors ran tests. Blood pressure dangerously high, severely dehydrated, malnourished, elevated cortisol levels consistent with chronic stress. The emergency physician looked at my chart with concern. "Mrs. Reynolds, when did you last have a complete physical?" I couldn't remember. Maybe 3 years. She examined me carefully. I was wearing a hospital gown, and I watched her eyes pause at the bruise on my upper arm. Yellow now, but still visible. I'd forgotten about it. David had grabbed me too hard last week when I'd tried to leave the room during one of his lectures about everything I was doing wrong. "How did you get this bruise?" "I don't remember. Maybe I bumped into something." She made a note. Then she looked at David, who was hovering near the door, and said something that changed the course of my life. "Sir, I need to examine your wife privately now. Hospital policy. If you could wait in the family area?" David's smile tightened, but he couldn't refuse without looking suspicious. "Of course. I'll be right outside, darling." The moment the door closed, the doctor moved her chair closer to my bed. "Eleanor," she said quietly, "I need to ask you something important. Are you safe at home?" The question hit me like a physical blow. Are you safe at home? Such a simple question. Such an impossible question. I opened my mouth to say yes, of course, to protect David's reputation, to protect myself from whatever would come next. But what came out instead was a sound I didn't recognize. A sob that had been building for 4 years. The doctor handed me tissues and waited. She didn't rush me, didn't tell me to calm down, just sat there while 4 years of pain poured out of me in broken sentences and half-finished thoughts. "He doesn't hit me," I finally managed. "He just controls everything, criticizes everything, compares me to his dead wife constantly. He won't speak to me for days if I do something wrong. He threw a coffee mug at the wall, and I don't even know what's real anymore. Am I really that incompetent? Am I really that difficult? The doctor took my hand. Eleanor, what you're describing is emotional and psychological abuse. It's real abuse, and it often escalates. But I'm 62 years old. I was married before. I should have known better. Abuse doesn't discriminate by age, and abusers are often very skilled at making their victims feel like everything is their fault. That's how they maintain control. I don't know what to do. I've cut off everyone. My daughters barely know me anymore. My friends have given up. Your daughters are in the hallway right now. They drove here the moment they heard you collapsed. They love you, and when you're ready, they'll help you. She kept me overnight for observation. A social worker named Maria came to see me, a woman in her 50s with warm eyes and a direct manner. She explained things I'd never understood: the cycle of abuse, love bombing, isolation tactics, the way abusers control their victims not with fists but with criticism, silence, and the withdrawal of affection. She gave me pamphlets about domestic violence, warning signs I hadn't recognized as warning signs, a safety plan checklist, the number for the National Domestic Violence Hotline. You don't have to decide anything right now, she said, but I want you to think about what you want your life to look like, not what David wants, what you want. That night, alone in my hospital bed, I thought about that question for the first time in 4 years. What did I want? I wanted to see Sophie's ballet recitals without asking permission. I wanted to call Catherine and Melissa without listening for David's car. I wanted to cook a meal without fear of criticism. I wanted to wear my floral dress to church. I wanted to take that watercolor class. I wanted to feel like myself again. I wanted to stop feeling small. I wanted my life back. The next morning, Catherine came into my room before David arrived. She closed the door and sat on the edge of my bed. Mom, I need to tell you something, and I need you to really hear me. Okay, honey. Sophie asked me a question yesterday. When you were unconscious, she asked me, Mommy, why does Grandma always look so sad when Grandpa David is around? I closed my eyes. Out of the mouths of babes. She's 8 years old, Mom, and she can see what's happening, what we've all been too polite to name. Catherine, I started, but she held up her hand. I've watched you disappear over the past 4 years. The mother who raised me, who taught second graders for 30 years, who volunteered everywhere, who had 1 million friends, who laughed all the time. She's gone, and in her place is this shadow who apologizes for everything, who never visits, who sounds scared every time she answers the phone. I didn't mean to. You didn't do anything wrong, Mom. He did this to you, and it ends today. When David arrived with more flowers and his concerned husband performance, Catherine met him at the door. The doctors want to keep her another night, she said. We'll stay with her. You should go home and get some rest. I could see the flash of anger in his eyes before he smoothed it away. Nonsense. I'll stay with my wife. Catherine didn't flinch. Actually, the doctor specifically requested family only for now. They're concerned about her stress levels. She looked at him with her father's steady gaze. We'll call you tomorrow. For a moment, I thought David would argue, but there were witnesses, nurses, other families. He couldn't make a scene without shattering the image he'd so carefully constructed. Of course, he said, bending to kiss my forehead. Rest well, darling. I love you. The words curdled in the air. After he left, Catherine, Melissa, and I talked for hours. I told them everything. 4 years of criticism and control, the comparisons to Martha, the isolation from everyone I loved, the mug shattering against the wall, how I'd become terrified in my own home. They cried. They held me. They apologized for not seeing it sooner. We thought you'd chosen him over us, Melissa said. We thought we'd done something wrong. The guilt of that nearly broke me. That my daughters, my precious girls, had spent 4 years thinking I'd abandoned them, when the truth was I'd been slowly erased. We made a plan. The next day, David went to church like always. Sunday service, then his men's Bible study. Gone for at least 4 hours. Catherine and Melissa pulled into the driveway 30 minutes after he left. We moved quickly. My clothes, my documents, my medications, the photo albums from the garage. I paused in the doorway of the house I'd lived in for 4 years and never felt at home in. Is there anything else? Catherine asked. I looked at the perfect Victorian rooms, the furniture Martha had chosen, the walls I'd never been allowed to repaint. "Nothing here was ever mine," I said. I left a note on the kitchen counter. "David, I'm leaving. Please don't contact me. My attorney will be in touch." I didn't explain. I didn't apologize. I didn't make excuses for him or myself. I just left. The next few months were hard. David called constantly, leaving voicemails that cycled between apologetic and threatening. He showed up at Catherine's house once. She called the police. He wrote letters claiming I was having a mental breakdown, that I needed help, that my daughters were manipulating me. My attorney filed for divorce. David contested everything, tried to claim I was mentally incompetent. But the hospital records told a different story. Malnourished, dehydrated, chronic stress markers, the bruise documented in my chart, the social worker's notes from our conversations. The judge granted a restraining order. The divorce took 10 months. David fought over every piece of furniture, every dollar, dragging it out as long as possible. One final act of control. But in the end, I was free. I'm 63 now. It's been 14 months since I left. I live in a small apartment near Catherine and Sophie. It's not fancy. 2 bedrooms, a little kitchen, a balcony where I grow tomatoes in pots. But every corner of it is mine. I see my granddaughter every week. I was at her last ballet recital, sitting in the front row, crying when she took her bow. I call Melissa in Chicago every Sunday, and we talk for hours. I finally took that watercolor class. Turns out I'm not half bad. My teacher says I have a good eye for color. My paintings hang on my walls now, bright splashes of flowers and landscapes that make me smile every time I see them. I reconnected with Janet. We meet for coffee every Tuesday at our old cafe. She cried when I told her the truth. "I thought I'd done something to upset you," she said. "I never imagined. No one ever does." That's how abusers survive. I still have hard days. Sometimes I wake up in a panic, thinking I've done something wrong. Sometimes I apologize when there's nothing to apologize for. Sometimes I hear David's voice in my head, telling me I'm incompetent, difficult, not half the woman Martha was. But I'm in therapy now. I go to a support group for women who've experienced domestic abuse. I'm learning to trust myself again. Learning that what happened wasn't my fault. Learning that leaving wasn't cowardice. It was the bravest thing I've ever done. Last month, I heard through the church grapevine that David's son Andrew had stopped speaking to him. Apparently, he'd started treating his new girlfriend the same way he treated me. Andrew saw the pattern, recognized it from his own mother's final years. He'd confronted David and been met with the same cold fury I knew so well. David is alone now, rattling around that perfect Victorian house with Martha's furniture and Martha's memories, looking for someone new to control. I hope he never finds her, and if he does, I hope she sees through him faster than I did. If you're listening to this and any of it sounds familiar, please hear me. You're not crazy. You're not too sensitive. You're not the problem. Emotional abuse is real. It's insidious because there are no bruises to photograph, no wounds to document. It lives in the criticism that never stops, the silence that punishes, the slow erasure of everything that makes you who you are. It lives in comparisons to people you can never compete with. It lives in isolation from everyone who loves you. It lives in making you so small that you forget you were ever anything else. If someone makes you feel like you're never good enough, if they control who you see and where you go, if they punish you with silence, if they compare you to others to make you feel worthless, if they isolate you from family and friends, that is abuse. You deserve better. You deserve to feel safe in your own home. You deserve to be loved without conditions, without criticism, without fear. You deserve to be yourself, and you can leave. I know it feels impossible. I know you've been told no one will believe you, that you have nowhere to go, that you can't make it on your own. Those are lies. Lies designed to keep you trapped. Call the National Domestic Violence Hotline at 1-800-799-7233. They have resources. They understand. They can help you make a safety plan. Tell someone you trust, a friend, a family member, a doctor, anyone. Break the silence that keeps you imprisoned. Document everything. Save texts. Keep a journal. Not because you're planning to leave today, but because if you decide to, you'll need evidence. And know this: your abuser will not change. No matter how many times they apologize, no matter how many flowers they bring, no matter how convincing they are during the good periods, the pattern will continue, and it will escalate. I was one of the lucky ones. I got out before the coffee mugs became fists. I had daughters who loved me despite 4 years of silence. I had a granddaughter whose simple question cut through all the lies. "Grandma, why do you always look so sad when Grandpa David is around?" That question saved my life. Whatever your circumstances, there is a way out. You are stronger than you know. You are worthy of love and respect. You are not alone. There is life after abuse. A good life. A life where you can breathe freely. Where you can paint watercolors and grow tomatoes and laugh with your grandchildren. Where you can be yourself again. You are worth saving. Please, if you need help, reach out. Don't wait until it's too late. Don't wait for it to get better, because it won't. You deserve to be safe. You deserve to be free. You deserve to be happy. It starts with one simple truth. You matter. Your life matters. Your happiness matters. And no one, no matter how charming, no matter how respected, no matter how many flowers they bring, has the right to take that away from you.